Assalamu alaikum, run things rude boy, Nabil Aziz, becomingthealphamuslim.com, and the Becoming the Alpha Muslim podcast. Welcome to another episode. Today, how to learn math even if you ain't that smart. Now, some of you might be thinking, what the hell does learning math have to do with becoming the Alpha Muslim? I'll tell you. The Islamic tradition is one of learning, study, and transmission. So, in order to preserve that, Muslim scholars put a great deal of effort into the art and science of learning. And there are a number of books written about it in the sort of Islamic tradition, whole volumes, possibly even more than one volume. One of the books is called Hilyatu Talibul Ilm, of which I have an abridged translation on Becoming the Alpha Muslim if you'd like to download it for free at becomingthealphamuslim.com/seeker. Now, in the past maybe decade or so, this subject, they call it meta learning. Meta learning has been gaining popularity among a lot of the writers and authors and speakers in the self improvement community. For example, Tim Ferriss, Scott H. Young, Cal Newport. Now, I don't know any of these guys personally to bring them on the show. However, I do know an authority on the subject of meta learning, and that's my buddy, Ed Latimore. Ed, what's going on, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, man. Thank you for considering me a bit of an authority on meta learning. I don't know if I'm at the level of a Cal Newport or a Tim Ferriss or Scott Young. I've been reading those guys forever. I remember Scott Young, way back. He's been around for a while. I just thought of that blog immediately because I always uh, read him before he blew up and started the rapid learner courses and things like that. But yeah, so with my background, I've kind of had to learn how to learn, and that has made me better at math and generally anything I try to put my mind to. But it's also made me a really good teacher as well, and I really enjoy that. It's one of the things I do in my life that I've written about it a few times and definitely tweeted about it, but tutoring kids and science and math because no one can really do that these days. I'm learning, and the schools are kind of awful at making sure that the children really understand the subject. So I've taken it upon myself to not not just learning for myself, but also teaching and explaining it to others. I enjoy seeing them learn, and it makes me learn even better.
Yeah, and a another benefit actually of the meta learning or understanding meta learning is that we live in an age where information is free. So now the ability to process
Right.
information is invaluable. It's priceless because there's just so much out there. You need to have the wherewithal or the tools that could help you process that information in a sound way. So let's talk about your background. Now, there's more than just you understanding the subject of meta learning. Your background is also interesting in the sense that you entered university very late or later than most at the age of 28. Is that right?
Yeah,
As well as that,
that's correct.
yeah, and as well as that, you're as a professional boxer, you're somebody who gets punched in the head for a living. So,
Yeah.
with those two things, first of all, start learning. As we know, learning later on in life is much harder than it is when you're younger. And second of all, I believe getting punched in the head sort of kills off some of your brain cells, right? So it plays
You
really hard.
know, whether getting punched in the head kills off some of your brain cells is I'll say debatable. Maybe I'm just saying that because I don't want to believe it. But I certainly will make this statement. I don't think it kills off any more brain cells than the amount of drinking the average person does. And since I don't drink, I'm balancing out the
Yeah.
loss that I would normally sustain. So I think I'm doing about all right. Or and as I always like to say, like 70% serious, 30% joking, is that I have enough brain cells to lose and still stay ahead of most people. So I'm gonna be I'll be all right as long as I box smart and don't take too many hard shots over time. With that said, my unique background going into university late, learning math and science and all those things at a later age. Is it more difficult than if I had learned them younger? I think the tools that I have available are different. I think when you're younger, right? When we're younger and we attempt to learn a thing like always, the two things that come to mind always are chess and skiing for some reason. And when you're young, you don't, for skiing, for example, you don't have a concept of getting hurt. So when I would see these kids at the ski lodge, like six or even younger than that, skiing down with no poles, and I'm like, "What are you doing? That's incredible! It's taking me." I mean, I just remember it vividly when I was learning how to ski, spending all this time on a bunny hill, and then there's a kid, not even 6 years old, skiing down and having a good time with no poles because they don't have a concept of fear. They don't have the same concept of limitations that we do. So that's a plus on the side of learning when you're young. You simply don't have an idea of your limits. However, when you get older, you have a greater idea of what's possible, and I think that gives you a plus in that direction. Now you know limits. Now you're aware that like it takes time and it takes energy, but you also know and have a greater, a much greater motivation because you know what you can get from putting in the work. You know what kind of work you can put in. You have all types of sources to draw upon. You know that people can't overcome hardship. I think a lot of kids, especially the unfortunate type raised in a fixed growth environment, they never realize that just because you suck now doesn't mean you won't suck. Doesn't mean you will suck in a year as long as you keep on working. And I think many adults, at the very least, can buy that concept intellectually. Whether they believe it viscerally, whether they take it to heart, is another question. But at least they can be goaded and coached along at that point. So that's like a plus for being an adult. So when we talk about math, for me, I knew that I could improve. Like I didn't think I was fixed. I didn't think how I'd done in high school was indicative of how I could do later in life if I apply myself. And then on the other side, we talk about and language learning too. Like it compares to chess. If chess is not the, the forte of some people listening, but I know everyone's like had some experience with language learning, and they think, "Oh, I'm terrible at languages. Like, if only I had learned this when I was a kid, or I had started when I was younger." And you have to remember that even though a child can absorb the language, can absorb it better, because they really don't have a choice in the matter. As an adult, you're aware of more learning strategies, so I think that balances the immersion that the immersion advantage that a young child has when they attempt to go learn a language. Like, oh man, you're four, you've learned like, four languages, but they didn't really learn them. They didn't have a choice. Everyone in the house speaks it, or their environment, especially if they're surrounded by it. But as an adult, you have a choice and you know how to use like when I want to help myself understand things, I know to go to YouTube and like sit and listen, and I know how to study. When you're even a 10-year-old, you don't know those things, and you can learn fast. It depends. It just depends. You can learn faster as an adult or faster as a child. But I think the pros and cons to each age range differs and effectively as a wash. It just depends on the individual. And then there's the X factor. We have like an IQ of like 180. Yeah, you can do whatever you want, but we're not talking about those kind of people.
Yeah. And that's why, for example, they have pedagogy and andragogy, which is there are different teaching methods for kids versus adults. Because I think just to summarize what you said, even though you may be able to cognitively, you might be stronger as a child, as an adult, you have the benefit of experience, and you can appreciate that the process of learning gets results no matter what your natural aptitude, right?
Absolutely. A child, I mean, not just from my perspective, I think about like what I see and what I have observed in other people's children. I think that children really don't have, I mean, unless outside of ones who've been like brought up in perhaps music or sports, where there's kind of an expectation that if you apply yourself, you will improve. It's amazing how many kids, or how many people in general, for your kids, how many people in general don't have that perspective on life if they never competed or never played a sport or never played an instrument, or, and I'll even say to a lesser degree learned another language. They don't understand that if you apply yourself over time, you will get better at a thing. Whether you become a world class master is kind of irrelevant. What is relevant is that you can start from a position of no ability and get to a position of relative proficiency if you apply over time. And that is what a young child simply doesn't know. They're just having fun. I mean, it's not even there's no concept of like, let me be as good as people think I should be, or let me become a great, so I can
Mm.
show off. Or maybe they want to show off, but it's not like an adult where their entire identity is kind of wrapped up in this failure or success model. And so it's really interesting to watch kids learn, and especially when you get them in an environment where it's where they're free to make mistakes. I think that's another big difference. Adults kind of don't have that. Yeah, they really don't have that that barrier. Like, if they're going to try a thing, they've already kind of accepted they're going to make mistakes. But kids really, and I think part of this is the schooling system, and they really don't like to make mistakes. And so if you can get a kid to understand that making mistakes is cool, and you can put them in the open and get them in an environment where they're not afraid to shout out answers and be foolish, you can make quite a bit of progress.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this that brings out two more advantages of learning as an adult because a child doesn't have the concept of mastery, as well as that the child doesn't know that it doesn't have the concept of or the knowledge that failure isn't a big deal in terms
Yeah.
of the ability to learn. So this is if we move on real quick, this is something that you've written a little bit about, I believe, in your book and as well as on your blog. Um, does natural ability have something to do with the ability to learn math or get good at math?
I'll say this. So I think we first let's deal with the extremes, because if it's one thing that communicating in mass to people all over the world with one tweet or one blog post has taught me, is that there's a small but vocal faction of people who will interpret your work through the lens of every single case. They don't understand that you're making
Yeah,
a
general
generalization.
statement.
And even if the general statement isn't wrong, we're just not factoring in people who are three standard deviations above the mean. Which, so let me deal with that case first, because I do think in this case that's kind of relevant. The the natural ability we speak of, we'll just say we'll call it a high IQ. And those are the people who, for whatever reason, they can process and learn the information faster or with less effort to get the same result as, I would take if it took me 1 hour to learn 50 words. They could do it in like 10 minutes. So, right. Uh, does that have an effect? Sure, it does. There's no way around that. But my point is always twofold. One, if you're not that person, do you think that you can't have success? And the answer is absolutely not. The world is not composed of only high IQ individuals. There is a place for everyone, assuming that they are willing to work. And I think that is the bigger advantage. The more important trait is as a work ethic and an understanding of the process that you need to go through to attain any type of proficiency in the skill. So there's that angle. That's a really important angle. And on the other one, it's what do you decide to believe? What lie do you tell yourself, right? You know, I always say that whether talent is real or not doesn't matter. What matters is, do you believe it? And if you believe it, are you believing it because it helps you or it justifies weakness? if you are going to decide that you can't ever be a thing because you don't have a talent for it, then whether talent is real or not, you've already decided that this thing you've created is going to be some type of limit on what you can actually accomplish. And I don't think that's a good idea. There's enough challenges in the world for anything you want to go after. Why would you create a new challenge, especially one there's so much debate out there about if it even exists? The 10,000 hour rule, right? You put 10,000 hours in anything, you can become world class at it. And then there's the counter research that says, oh no, that's only if you have a certain level of talent or something. And I'm like, it's like nutrition. It's like the old fitness thing. You get the same. You ask the same question to 10 different experts, you're going to get 11 different answers, and that is pretty much how we go. So, in the realm of, is this talent thing real, or does it matter? I always say, just pick the perspective that's going to help you the most. Not you can't obviously contradict physical law. You can't say, man, gravity doesn't exist, I want to jump over that bridge and fly, so boom, I'm just gonna go. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. Physical law beats you. But you can choose ways to think and see the world and see yourself. And it's not about lying to yourself. If you need 3 or 4 days to study for a concept, obviously you give yourself that time. Hey, I just see your cat in the background. That's cool. And
Two of them.
if you need that much time, then you give yourself that much time. What matters is the result you can produce and how much you love working towards that result. Your initial talent is irrelevant in learning, I think.
Yeah, there's daughter, one of them, one of the daughters. Yo, you know what? While you were mentioning that, so this is really, really cool. So you said like it this just depends on how you view talent. Either you view talent in the sense that it is something that helps you, or is an advantage that helps you get better in addition to the work that you do, or you view talent as something that will justify your your refusal to try. And just as you were saying that, you might like this as well because you're a Dragon Ball Z fan, and I thought of Vegeta because Vegeta, like, there's this sort of dichotomy between Goku and Vegeta, right? We all think that Goku is the guy with natural talent, and then Vegeta can never beat him because he can never reach that, doesn't have that natural talent. But Vegeta also has a particular view about his own intrinsic ability, right? Because he views himself as a pure blood Saiyan, and because of that pride, and because I'm a Saiyan, this guy, how is this guy beating me? That pushes him continuously to greater and greater heights
Right.
to try to beat Goku, right? So
I
what
say
do
that
you?
again.
Yeah. So what I was saying was, Vegeta has that intrinsic. You can call it.
Right.
He calls it Saiyan pride, right? Or he believes
Hmm.
in his intrinsic worth as a pure blood Saiyan to be able to overcome Goku, no matter how strong Goku becomes, and that pushes him to train to greater and greater heights in the pursuit of that goal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that I love Vegeta, man. Because it's just a cartoon, but there's always lessons in everything. And one of the coolest things I thought about, or that you see throughout the series rather, is that Goku can take every step of the way. He's a little ahead of Vegeta, and Vegeta every time responds by going, like you said, he goes, "Okay, I am going to be stronger than this person or this saying, right? I'm going to be stronger." I mean, and just willed himself to the Super Saiyan level, right? Took himself there with intense training, and that's the kind of line to yourself what I'm talking about. I mean, but there was a tweet I put out a while ago that was like, you know, or someone, I think I retweeted it. Walk around with the confidence in yourself that Vegeta had when he led Cell. absorb Android 18. I was like, that is brilliant.
And I know
Eh,
that
you
is
know,
so we're talking the same language. So anybody who watches
right.
Dragon Ball
So
Z,
and if you don't know the show, the TLDR, Vegeta purposely put himself at a handicap, but he didn't think it was a handicap because he was that confident in his ability. But that's what I mean. Uh, you you can look at all this. Like for me, for example, I mean, I knew I had to find something to grab onto because when I decided to go back to school, I knew that it was going to be for something quantitative and in the sciences, or it wasn't going to be at all. Like I didn't think it would be worth it. I did not like, what I was doing, so I wanted to make more money. So it was like, okay, going to go back to school because that was the path I seen to making more money. And because I said that's the path I got to take, I said these are the abilities I got to get. So even though I thought I was terrible, I mean, I really was. I had no confidence in math at all, in my ability to do math. I did know that you give me enough time, I can learn anything. So I started almost a year out before I went back to school and really started to learn and break down a subject, calculus, that I had previously failed on 3 different occasions, for 3 different reasons. But the point is, I had no reason to go into a calculus class for the fourth time thinking that I would do any better than I had the previous 3,
yeah,
other than the fact that I sat and I really broke down all the math, how it worked, and what it meant. And I knew that if I was I pretty much said this to myself. I said, if I'm going to fail this time, it's going to be because I really am not cut out for this path, and then we'll figure it out at that point. And what I learned about myself, and what do all people learn about themselves when they decide that they are not going to let a talent, and I put that in air quotes, or lack thereof, justify decisions they make. You learn that the most valuable talent really is just hard work, and that translates into believing in yourself. And there's little things along the way, like getting a quick success. Like I mean, like we were talking about with the internet, and that's whatever knowledge is one click away for everything. I can't tell you how many problem sets I went over and over and over to make sure I understood. And when I didn't understand the thing, I didn't get distressed. I was just like, man, why did that happen? And now I don't have to think about it. I mean, now one of my favorite things, I have a client now, and I'm going to get another one where they're prepping for the AP calculus exam. I never thought I would be able. And for me, it's so easy to just talk and help them because I spend so much time. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, you got to understand, it's not that I'm better or any more talented than you. I've just felt this in every way possible. So I know all the ways to think about different problems. And so you are the beneficiary of all of my failures. And so it only looks like I know more than you. But the reality is I'm probably dumber than you. You just gotta just believe in what I'm saying. And then they see how the problem's working, and then because I spent so much time learning it the hard way, I mean, really the hard way, I can explain it better to them, and they can grab it easier, way easier than a teacher could explain. Because what I'm learning is that these teachers just teach from these solution manuals. At least in high school. In college, it's a different ballgame. But in high school, they definitely are teaching from like these kind of pre-described manuals, and they may not understand where a solution came from. I've seen that a few times, and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to tell you where that came from, and you're going to understand. And it's not, and more importantly, there's nothing intimidating about it. Trust me, if I can figure this out, and then I always play on it, like I get hit in the head for a living, I probably got less brain cells than you, right? Then you're gonna do just fine. You're not even boxing.
yeah, exactly. And I think they always say that the guy who didn't have the natural talent is always the best coach, right? Because he had to learn the hard way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think, okay, even if I didn't think so, I've got enough feedback at this point for doing this for almost a year. I've got enough feedback from different students to know that I'm a little better than average, right? And I think a lot of that comes from there's obviously my temperament, and one of the things that I've always been good at is explaining things, and now it just so happens to extend to the realm of math and science. But it's also because I made so many mistakes, and but I made those mistakes not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because it's always been an ingrained passion of mine to kind of learn this subject. And because of that, I never let a stupid thing like talent, there it is in the air quotes again, talent, hold me back or push me forward.
Yeah. And Simon Sinek has this book called "Start with Why." So let's start with why. Why should everyone? Here I'm specifically referring to the adults in the Becoming the Alpha Muslim audience. Why should everyone study math?
Because when so you have to understand what math really is. And no one really understands what it is, right? I mean, or maybe some people are a lot closer. So what I'm giving you is my interpretation, which means, take that with a grain of salt, use it to help you,
Yeah.
hopefully, and don't let it discourage you. But I always say math is just a series of relationships. And we see this when we go and describe things in the universe, like everything from finance to economics to not physics, electronics to mechanical systems. All we're looking at is a relationship, and math has given us a way to describe that relationship. If you can learn to think and understand what you're looking at in the most abstract sense, right? Everyone says, "Oh man, you just put it in front of me, I can do well." And to that, always, or rather, I don't know, it's not like classroom learning. Just give me. I don't use math a day in my life, and I hate when I hear that because I'm like, yeah, maybe you don't do use an equation, but you certainly use if you're worth anything. Use a relationship or relational thinking, and that's what math helps you kind of play with and do. You know how they say like poker teaches you about emotional control, but are you ever sitting in front of somebody reading their face with cards? No, you're taking an idea and you're applying it to another field. Same with chess. You're not sitting there moving pieces in front of everyone you deal with, but you are trying to think and visualize a plan and get around it in the restraint of time. We take the lesson from chess. And likewise, the lesson we take from math is how can we see how one thing relates to another, and if we can find that relationship, how can we manipulate it to solve a problem? And we do this even in areas where we don't think there's any math. For example, in social situations, if you do X, then you expect a Y reaction. And then we can think of that in terms of like, okay, X is our independent variable that has nothing to do me walking into a crowd, right? That's the independent variable, and talking to people for 5 minutes or 7 minutes. What gets a better result? What allows people to feel more comfortable with me? Okay, and then their level of comfort is now the independent or the dependent variable. What is it dependent on? Depending on how long I talk to them and how I enter the crowd. And if you can see these relationships, then your whole mind starts thinking in these terms. And that's how your mind works anyway. Like I see everything when I'm looking at things now, I see everything as a damn or a free body diagram in terms of vectors. And I'm like, why am I thinking about the world this way? That's because I'm always looking at physics. So in this regard, when you do look at a thing over and over again, you do see it through the lens of that thing. And I think one of the greatest lenses to look at the world through, because the world is already mathematical anyway, is through math. If you can grab the math idea, then you're going to be pretty good at whatever else you look at.
As you were talking, I just remembered that the Nash Equilibrium is like it came out of game, right? Trying to pick
Yep.
up girls.
It's not. There's a reason. There's a reason why all the high paying careers, and those with the highest job satisfaction as well, all happen to have a mathematic component. That is not a coincidence, because you can do so much. You don't even have to a lot of the people who come out of physics, they end up going into Wall Street. You're like, what does that have to do with anything? Well, we learn to work on hard problems and see
Yeah,
relationships between things that people do not think otherwise are related. And that's a superpower in of itself. Being able to
definitely.
find relationships where none exist.
Yeah, and I remember I can't remember which book I was reading, but basically they said So you don't lift weights because the objects in your daily life are, barbell shaped or dumbbell shaped. You lift weights because it makes all of the other things that you do in your life much easier. And it's the same with
Yes,
math, right? It's just mathematics is just weightlifting for your brain, I suppose.
that's a great. I never heard that, but it's true. If you think with rigor, you work with rigor, your ego gets dragged through the mud. I mean, I've never felt stupider than I have in my life this semester, but it's good because I know I'm getting smarter. It's a good sign usually when you don't when you feel a little below average, as weird as that sounds. But yeah, that feeling that you get from working on a hard thing, lifting a heavy weight, solving a problem, talking to strangers, whatever, right? That always translates into other areas that you may not necessarily be aware of, but you
Yeah,
certainly are getting a tremendous benefit from.
yeah. All right. So next question. So now we've understood why we want to study math. When you first got into it, what was the approach that you took? And if you could sort of explain to us that whether the approach you took at the beginning has changed based on how much you've learned and how much you've improved in the skill of learning, or has it stayed the same throughout?
Okay, so when I first started to break my brain down and relearn this stuff, what the first thing I did was I pursued pure tactical things. I made sure I could solve problems. I just solve, and solve some more. You keep solving, and eventually you do one of two things. You either get tired of solving, and you're like, "What is the point of all this?" Or you go, "Okay, how can I get better at solving? This is taking way too long. The problems are starting to look different as they do because they go from this kind of cookie cutter, almost not realistic kind of presentation to the things I'm working on now, which are so close to, I mean, they're so close to reality. It's annoying because you can't use your thinking. You solve a problem and your solution is just another equation, which people hate. But that's life, right? Finding
Yeah,
relationships. Anyhow, so I worked on so many problems and I kept working on problems, and eventually I had to ask myself why, you know. And I think that's the biggest thing that happens. You move from how to why, and it isn't why that you start to really understand math. I mean, I've thought one of my favorite things to do is to reteach these kids the number line, a really basic idea, the number line and fractions,
mm,
because if you understand, because it's amazing. If I ask you, what's bigger, 1/10 or 1/5, and you shouldn't have to think too long about that. But it's amazing how how long people do because they don't understand the idea of a fraction, and then when you can understand a fraction, and you can understand inversion,
yeah,
and all of a sudden now everything when someone says 50 miles per hour, this doesn't sound just like a thing you take. I mean, you really start thinking like, wow, every mile I'm covering, or every hour I'm covering 50 miles. That means in 1 hour I cover, 50 miles. And if I cover half of that, and these are basic ideas, but it really forces, or rather forced me to understand, okay, why is, or why does this always happen this way? Where does this zero go? Why can I do a certain thing? I mean, right now I'm at the point, for example, in my education, where the solution manual was just it causes more problems than help, to be honest with you, because it just shows you a solution, and it's like, well, how do we get there,
yeah,
right? Uh, and it's not about just getting to a place. It's about understanding how you got there and why you can get there. So if you do enough whys, eventually you'll stumble into how. Once you're into the how, then you start having fun. once I got into why things worked, why, what a derivative was, and why that was important for calculus, and why the integration is the opposite of the derivative, and and why I can use all of these things, and they say the area under the curve, and and then pour it in the idea like, oh, why can't I use calculus to describe that, and why can't I use it, and what is probability really measuring, things of that nature. Then I can take the ideas that I've learned specifically in math, and then I can start pouring them out. When someone tells me that the the what an imaginary number is, for example, this was a fun one for me. Imaginary numbers, when you take the square root of -1, and we just memorize that, most people, and they don't ever give any thought about it. I was like, this is just, and because then imaginary numbers showed up on optics, and I was like, wait a second, they can't be imaginary if there's a physical component. So I went and I really understood what I was looking at and how I could use them, and now is part of the reteaching. All of my students understand clearly that an imaginary number is not imaginary; it really has the real place, and so now they can look at problems and think about them more fun, and have more fun thinking about it. So what it really comes down to is, how am I going to make sure I understand this to the point where I can explain it to someone else without using math? And I think that's the next level, when I can explain an idea and I can go, okay, this is what this means. And as I always say, don't forget the equations. Don't worry about we can deal with that later. Or my favorite, a computer can figure that out. You're not smarter than a computer.
Mm.
Um, let's work on the relationship. What are we really looking at? Let's talk about that. And when you can do that, when you can talk about everything that's supposedly just a number, right? Then you got it. Then your conversation about it doesn't have to be great, but at the very least, you want to get to that point where you can talk to people, and you could explain a concept, and they should hear it and go, wait, you're talking about continual rotation around an origin. Okay, so if you start here, you spin around, you spin around, you spin around. Oh, you might be describing Euler's equation. Oh, maybe. But let them come to that conclusion. You don't need to talk. You don't need the numbers. You don't need the complicated language. And if you do, then you're still dependent on them. And that's the whole goal for me. It's always been to get away from the complicated language. I can use it obviously if I'm talking to other, students or my professors, because then the language is appropriate. But if I want, for my own enjoyment, to make sure I understand that, I always try and put things in my own words. So that's the if I could sum up my thought process on that, it would be, make sure you just get a working mechanical, tactical ability with solving problems, then move to how, or rather, why does this work? Why do these rules apply? And then make sure you kind of explain those rules without using the technical jargon and common speak. And that is, if you take that path, and I think that can apply to anything, not just math, but boxing or chess or skiing, just it's everything, music. You want to start in the discipline and then eventually move past it. As Bruce Lee said, man, forget everything you learned. Wow, I really think I finally understand what he meant by that. Just talking to you about this.
Yeah, he also says uh, the three stages of learning are uh, one, and you'll like this because you're a boxer. One, a punch is just a punch. Two, a punch is no longer just a punch. And three, a punch is just a punch.
Yep. that's pretty much, it's funny, that's pretty much what I'm describing. You start, it's like a derivative is a derivative, and then you go how, and you go, wow, a derivative is not just a derivative, it's really all these things about changing. And then you move to the next level, and it's like, okay, a derivative is just a derivative. We'll worry about that the formula later. Let's talk about what it is, and it's just a derivative. Wow, man, you know, you can the wisdom. You can get wisdom from all sources, and it all comes back to the same point.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think the more you experience life and live life, you start to see all of the connections between these different sort of aphorisms or wisdoms and things like that, and it gives you a much
Absolutely.
better appreciation of it. Yeah. And I think there's you've written about this yourself, but what are some of the ways your study of math or your study of physics has personally helped you in your day-to-day life?
Oh man, and personally helped in my day to day life. Okay. Have I experienced in a situation where I was like, man, I'm really happy. I know how to solve the Hoffman orbit, man. I didn't know how I was going to get to Mars otherwise. No, I don't think I've experienced anything. Okay, actually, no. Scratch that. Scratch that. Scratch that. Uh, I've done. I remember. Man, I cannot remember, and I don't want to harass her, but I know it had something to do with. She had got some stuff on her hand, and I said, put this on your hand, that'll get rid of the stinging. And it did because it was an acid base reaction. And that was just my thought. I think chemistry is a little more useful in that regard. If you understand why one thing works, you can kind of figure out how to solve problems on the fly in that way. Math, not so much directly unless you're calculating a thing, but it has helped me think about problems in a pretty fun way. I like when I fly, I think about like why. Uh, I remember I was grounded somewhere because the plane had to drop off. It's when I moved to LA, and some dude on the plane had a heart attack. So we had to land in Kansas City halfway between the East Coast and the West Coast, and we had to wait, and I couldn't remember why we had to, I didn't know why we had to wait. They said something about fuel, right? And I was like, oh man. And I thought about the situation years after the fact, and I was like, that's right. Because you were expecting to burn off a certain amount of fuel in the air, and now your plane's too heavy to take off again for the amount of fuel you have to get to LA. So I was like, oh, what an interesting way to think about these problems. So in terms of my practical situations, I haven't really had math help directly, at least none that I can think of off the top of my head. It's helped me repair some basic electronic things, uh, and definitely like some issues with some basic things if I need to solve problems with cooking, setting fires, what's gonna burn better, that kind of idea, those kind of ideas. But I definitely, math is like the big thing out there where you work on all the other disciplines you can actually apply. And in that regard, I've been exposed to the I've been taken to the novice or the intermediate level of all the sciences: biology, physics, chemistry, right? And that helps me see and understand why certain things work. In nutrition, it really, or not nutrition, in my training, that's actually the once again, but that I probably would put that more in the chemistry realm. What's going to work better for my diet to achieve a certain thing versus what isn't. Biology and chemistry. But I would have never touched those things if I hadn't been forced to take them. And then as I was developing and understanding the math, my appreciation of those subjects increased. And now I try to think like I don't think I'll ever read a biology book again in my life because I think it's rote memorization. But I really do enjoy learning some of the chemistry of why things work, why certain batteries work. That's cool to me. Uh, jump in my car, I more or less remember, she was super reliant on reading the manual. I wanted to just go from memory. It was nice to have my memory confirmed. Yeah, and because if it had been wrong, maybe one of us been dead. Who knows? But yeah, there are problems that you can solve if you understand physics, especially the electronics, because we live in a heavily electronic or a heavy digital world where you need to have some knowledge of how to fix a thing, how to work a thing, things of that nature. So, and it also, this is the other cool thing. I really am way better at following basic tech directions than I was 5 years ago. It's not even a question. I can just sit down and read through, and if there is an issue, I can see, okay, it likely happened here or here. But this is only with text stuff. I don't.
Yeah, I think given your situation, I think your knowledge of math would directly translate to your Twitter game, and then your knowledge of physics would translate to your boxing, right?
Yeah, that's another area, right? In boxing for sure, where I'm always thinking in terms of what are they really saying, right? And when I say what are they really saying, what I'm really saying is, uh, what language can I put this in to make sense to me so I can affect it better? And I'll never forget, you know, my coach said when I first started work on him a few years ago, he said, your punches have a lot of thud, not a lot of snap. And I was like, man, what the hell does that even mean? Right. And then I learned a little more physics, and I was like, you know what you meant to, I said to him, I said, you know what you meant to say, Tom? You meant to say my punches have a lot of momentum, but not a lot of force. And to correct that, and that makes sense how you make your punches have more snap and generate more force. And I was like, that's what you meant to say. And then we were talking about how to defend and rolling with the punches. And it hit me like, I mean, but at that point I had learned enough, and I was like, you're talking about increasing the impulse so you can change the direction of the punch by how much time it spends in contact with you. Because right, that's the idea, is that when you punch a person, your punch should never stay at a consistent velocity. It's got to change. You've either got to be punching through the target, or you punch and you pull your punch back quickly. The worst thing you can do is punch and then let it rod, because that doesn't hurt anyone, right? Your airbag works on the same principle. Is that it's coming out and it's decreasing the amount of time you have in contact with a surface, and it's only by a small amount, by fractions of a second that you're gaining. But that's the difference between, when you hit when your head smashes into the dashboard, for example. Uh, what really hurts you is the fact that you are hitting the dashboard and you're in contact with it for a split second, like a snappy punch. However, if you can land on a pillow or a cushion, you're in touch with it and you're going down slowly, you're in contact more and more till you stop moving. You have more contact time until you stop moving, and that decreases the amount of force you hit it with. And I was like, that's what you mean by rolling with the punches. And then we talk, and then it talks about, your hook and your punches have to come from your core. You have to, you don't want to throw wide punches, right? And there's the defensive element of that. You don't want to leave yourself open, but there's also, it allows you to punch faster. The closer you are, the shorter the radius is from your core where you're spinning, and the end of it, of your punch, the faster, more force, the more force you can generate, because that turn directly correlates with the turn at the end. So these are the ways I think, and I think it helps me explain. I think obviously I don't explain. You need to put more. You need to you need to have your punches have more acceleration and velocity. I don't say that, but I understand how to approach fixing it so a guy can immediately feel his uh his punches have more impact if he decides to listen to me.
Yeah. And I think Mike Tyson was known for throwing wide looping punches as well, right? So that's angular momentum. So while your hooks would be much faster, his would be, I guess, much more painful, I suppose.
Oh my goodness. Tyson is, when you look at what Tyson does, he would have been, this is why, like, the boxing pundits don't put him in the top. Well, that and his reign was too, what they say, it was too short and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But if Tyson gets even spends more time. He did have a really short hook for a while. I mean, there was a series of, like, and you can actually see it. We sat there one day just studying Tyson,
Yeah.
and you can see over time Kevin Rooney getting his shoulders closer, or his elbows closer and closer and closer to where it was a shorter hook. And by the time he fought Trevor Burbick, I mean, that thing was a weapon. every time. Just blah. And then that's what, I mean, I think, what did he do? He ruptured his eardrum and disrupted his balance. I mean, it's still the clip they play of that hook he took, that Burbick took, and then he couldn't even stand up, and he was stumbling around the whole ring and gets waved off. But
Mm.
yeah, that the angular momentum and angular force. Yeah, you know the game. You know.
You know what? You know what it is. When I was in high school, we took because I did the British system. We did the A levels, right? So one of the subjects I took was called further mathematics. So we did mathematics and then further math. And further math is basically first year university math. So when I went to college, I actually got AP credits for all of my math and physics and yeah, math and physics electives. But
Oh, nice.
the problem with that was I actually needed to retain that knowledge for my degree, and
Oh.
not doing it for like like doing it every single day for like 2 years, and then just completely stopping after that for like a year or almost a year and a half. I completely lost all of it, and then it made my actual studying of my core subjects that much harder because I actually needed
Oh my
that knowledge.
goodness, losing it, isn't that the worst? I really hate the only thing worse than starting from scratch in terms of the energy that is required is when you know you knew a thing and then you come back and you're like, wow, I took too much time off. You know, like on a somewhat different note, right? I think about how miserable the first 2 months back training hard are going to be as my body adapts and gets back to fight condition, because it's not like just getting in shape like normal people. Like, oh, I'm gonna mosey along and go for. Nah, man, I'm gonna be on the track the first day, hitting 5Ks, hitting the bag for 12 rounds, because you have to do that. You got to force your body back at that level. Otherwise, who knows how long it'll take. And I just go, because I did it twice before. Once after an injury, and once after I enlisted, and I was away for 9 months, and it was no fun. It was miserable. I know it's gonna be miserable now, but you know what? Because I'm expecting it to be miserable, maybe it'll be great. Who knows? But it's the same way with when you come back to some knowledge you thought you had, even though we're a short term. Like I hate it. I hate it when I'm in a class and we learn something at the beginning of the semester, and and I should know better because it's all cumulative. But then then the last half, it's like, oh, that thing we did first week. Well, you probably should not have forgotten that because it's coming back.
Yeah. And you were talking about Twitter. You like your knowledge of network effects and that particular equation will affect the way you, for example, will deal with trolls, and it would
Right.
also affect the way that you would strategically use trolling to boost your signal, as it were.
Which is, like if you notice, I really, I, I'll say 95% of them, I really try to extend an olive branch or convert to fans, because I understand the power of one more node in the network, and I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. With that said, if they, there are some offenses that are too egregious. There are some people that just I can look at what they're saying and we ain't gonna vibe. So then I look, how many followers do you have? Are you dumb enough to retweet me? Let's see. Well, like one guy, I mean, I just used him as a school subject, and he eventually blocked me. He thought I was taking him seriously. I was like, no, we're just putting on a clinic showing that you have more than 1,000 followers, so I'm gonna let you retweet me and battle him. And he didn't get it. And eventually he did, and went and deleted stuff. And but at that point I had gained like 20 something off them. That's 20 new nodes in the network. It really, people don't appreciate. I mean, do you need math to appreciate that? No, but it helps.
Yeah. I mean, you'd come to the conclusion a lot faster rather than going by trial and error, right? Like
Yes,
now,
there you go. I don't that is probably the biggest difference in just the way I think in general,
yeah,
and how math will change your thought process is that you don't you're going to be interested in trying to create the easiest way to a thing, which is trying to calculate. It's like right, I went to help my mom move something. This was years ago. And I took one look at it and I said, we're not going to be able to do this. And, you know, I could sit here and work it out for you and show you, but we're not going to be able to do it this way. However, this fridge got in here, the door has changed since then. And she didn't believe me. And eventually the landlord went and said, oh, by the way, I installed this at some point. You're not going to be able to take it out this way. You know, I wasted all this time. Now I just be like, no, man, get out of here. But that, you know, that was back at a different point. But yeah, so what it does is you know, that was a more intuitive example, but you really look at problems like, okay, let me approach this problem the best way I can as opposed to throw some mud. And that really helps me because my whole approach naturally is to kind of ready, fire, aim. And math kind of tempers that and adds a little more of the aim
yeah,
and puts it before the fire, certainly.
yeah. You get a bit of finesse in your game.
Yeah, at the very least, a lot less redundancy and
Yeah,
inefficiency.
yeah, yeah. So now we've discussed how you achieve proficiency in a particular subject, whether it's algebra or diffie-q or calculus. Now you've slowly brought your understanding up to here. Is there a way for you to take it like to the next level, like up to here?
Oh man, you know, I struggle with this every day, like every day, because I took my math to a point where you know I could do what I'm doing now, and that is not and that's nothing to sneeze at. That is not a light a light accomplishment. But now I see where my limitations are, and it's really discerning because I would love to have the next level of intuition for math, and I think it will come eventually. If, or rather, I think it would come eventually if I was to pursue the topic into the graduate level. But I have no interest in doing that. So what I'm doing right now is, you know, I have enough ability to move through where I'm at now. Now, how do we take that, and what does that have to do with a general lesson? Well, I think the general lesson is you don't know how far you can be pushed until you need to be pushed that far. I know exactly where my journey with physics is more than likely going to end. That is going to end in 3 months, 3 to 4 months, and that's it. I'll always have my accomplishment. My brain is forever changed in terms of how I look and think about things. I look at things and think about them, but there's no more for me. So I have no reason to push to a. And on top of that, I know I'm in the two arguably most difficult classes from a mathematical perspective that you're going to face in an undergraduate physics degree. So, am I going to hop to the next level? Probably not. However, if a person listening has to go to the next level, then the what I would need to do to improve is what I'm not doing right now. But what I think all people would eventually realize is that it's pretty much how I started. Immersion. You need to immerse, and just continue to practice. I think if you can get to one level, I think if you can get to one plateau, I don't think there's a limitation on the next plateau you can get to in terms of ability. There might be a limitation on time, effort, or approach, but not so much in what is capable, right? Your growth becomes logarithmic, if that makes sense, you know, or whether the rate of increase continues to decrease. You know, you first go in the gym, you make huge gains in the first year, not so much in the second, and definitely not as much in the fourth year.
Yeah,
Same idea. And I think if we were to graph my ability, I'm probably at that point where I could spend 1 year in the gym and it would be like nothing. Or you know, but who knows? We will never know.
mm,
But I think for a person out there who is not sure about what they can do, just know that the growth likely doesn't end where I'm at. It's just that I just found another path I want to go down, and I'm really interested and excited about that path. And this has been great to me, and if I ever need to go do things with physics, I'll have that piece of recognition and the knowledge. But there's always a way to push past where you're at. People give limits too much credit, especially mental ones. We're not talking about running the 4 minute mile. I mean, I'm sure there's a genetic component to that. And I'm sure if you work hard enough, even if you don't have the optimal genetics, you can do it. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about thinking, working on problems, solving harder problems. You can learn to recognize and see those problems, but you got to want to. That's what I find is the most, or the biggest obstacle is that people don't want to do it. It's like, why would I do this? It looks difficult. It looks crazy. Same with foreign language. People go, oh, I can't learn a foreign language. I'm like, no, you just had a shitty experience your first time through. So you're not even open to entertaining some of the better ways and more independent ways of learning. So you just kind of go, okay, I'm done. No. So for me personally, I am not to sum this section up. For me personally, I don't think I will get much better at the higher level mathematics. And when I say higher level, if you wanted a definition, I mean anything that requires differential equations or higher. Do I think I could? Sure, but I have no desire in my path. For the person listening, everyone can get better. There is no limit if you want to be better, but only if you want to be.
Yeah. You mentioned immersion. I don't know if you know about the North African tradition of learning. So what they do is the kids are actually not given books. They have this wooden tablet. Okay, it's like a wooden, like a chalkboard or a whiteboard or something like that. And basically, what they have to do is they have to write down the portion of their lesson in like a reed pen on with ink, and then they basically go away and memorize that. Okay, once they memorize it, they come back and they recite it to the teacher, and the teacher explains the lesson to them. Yeah. So they're writing it down, they're memorizing it, they're getting it explained from the teacher. And after they do that, they actually go and even the kids, they teach it. Sometimes they'll teach it to a tree if they have to. Uh,
Huh.
and and they'll as long as they're getting the actual effect of or the practice of teaching. And in this way, it involves sort of every aspect of their senses when they're learning. On top of that, a lot of our texts, our traditional texts, are versified, so they're in rhyme form. They call it didactic poetry. So they have the added benefit of actually memorizing poems, which are easier to remember, and then the teacher sort of expounds on that.
Huh. That is, I did not know that. It certainly will make sure you learn.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a fascinating sort of subject, and we could probably keep talking about it forever. I mean, for many hours. So how does your learning or your ability to learn, whether it's math or physics or whatever, how does that translate into other aspects of your life or people who are into this sort of thing, students' lives? We've mentioned a few ways, but can you think of any other ways where your ability to learn helps you?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing is a confidence builder because there's kind of this idea that only intelligent people do these things, and even in high school, kids get this idea that they are not smart enough to do this thing, or that only the smart kids do it. And here's the thing: once you kind of shatter that wall, then it's like, okay, I did the hardest thing that everyone said is, for my age or my group. What else can I do? you know, and I think that's a really powerful question where you can get a person to ask, what else can I do? and you ask it in that manner. Like, I did this. This wasn't as terrifying or as difficult as I thought it would be. What else can I do?
Mm.
So if you can get that, you can get that. That is the biggest, the greatest benefit is when you see, and I'm so happy that I have the ability to not just speak from my perspective now, but from the perspective of helping students. When you see someone get that feeling, because I know what that feeling was like when I really got it, and I was like, I can get this. I can get through an engineering program or a physics program or whatever. That means I can do whatever I want to. Now there's not a limit. Now I'm not looking at that ceiling going, oh man, I want to know what's on the other side. I want to know what's on the next floor. Like, no. And I think that gives a person a great sense of confidence to where if they can, even if they have no idea. I said last year to this girl, I said, look, I know I've done my job. If you think you could do physics, she wanted to be a hairdresser. She has to she had to graduate from the class. That's the other thing, man. Schools are starting to make students have to take physics, which I think is, I'm not sure how I feel about it, and I like physics. So, but the point is, she had to take it, and you know, was already accepted as this hairstyling school, and I was like, look, my goal is if you feel like you could study this if you wanted to, then we've won. And
Mm.
that's pretty much. I mean, I like to think I haven't talked to her since she graduated. I have no idea, but I like to think that she thinks she could do that, and if she can't, whatever, right? That's her life. But she got the grade, so at the very least she could. We know by the marking sticks that they put down, the measuring sticks, that she could do it. So that's the best part about doing these subjects that people consider difficult, is that if you can do them, then you stop thinking that limit exists in your mind, and then you can apply yourself to other things if you want to. No longer you eliminate excuses. And I don't think, maybe they do have excuses, but I feel like being able to work through algebra 2 gives a student more confidence than being able to, like, write an essay, because I have kids say, like, oh, you can just create, you write well, you speak well, you use English, then no one questions your ability to use the language, whether you can express yourself
He
at a
speaks so
level that is.
well.
Yeah, you speak so much. Coffee so black. People compliment on how it speaks. but but yeah, but kid, no one ever questions whether a kid can use the language or whether they can do gym, or if they can do gym. They just go, okay, you're not like an athlete, and for whatever reason, it's accepted to to say that without having it be a major impact on a person's self-esteem. And people have gotten so used to shying away from the two worst taught subjects in school, foreign language and mathematics, that if you can get them to have some type of proficiency, then they go, okay, I did this. I'm going to go do whatever I want now. Instead of feeling like, okay, I did this. I'm going to do whatever else is available to me.
Yeah, yeah. And at the very least, you now have the ability to see relationships in different sort of you sort of disparate subjects. Like we've been doing the entire discussion.
Right.
We're talking Bruce Lee, we're talking boxing, we're talking Dragon Ball
Dragon
Z.
Ball Z.
Yeah, all of it is connected because you have the ability, and I suppose to a lesser extent, I have the ability also to see connections in these different aspects of life and our experiences, right?
Absolutely. And then I think it just makes you a more interesting, more fun person. I don't know. But I'm sure I'm saying that because I like to think of myself as an interesting, maybe not necessarily fun, but definitely interesting person.
And do you are have you read any books, or can you recommend any books that maybe talk about how to learn math or talk about the subject of meta learning more that you would like to recommend to the audience?
Two books for sure, man. One is a book I recommend to everybody, The Art of Learning, because Whiteskins breaks down the learning process. I saw someone describe the book as a book about learning how you learn.
Mm.
And I thought, what an interesting tagline. And then I read through it and I was like, he never explicitly talks about it that way. But he goes back and forth drawing comparisons between the Ta Chi Chuan push hands and the chess. And I thought it was a um, brilliant approach to seeing how learning in one discipline helps you learn in the other one and vice versa. And in the other book, A Mind for Numbers, and I cannot remember the author's name. I know it was a woman who was a Russian interpreter in the military, and I did she had a free course on I can't remember, Coursable maybe, but she had a free course, and I went through that course, and she really talks about some ideas that we've talked about here. So, A Mind for Numbers and The Art of Learning are the two best. Two best books on learning in general, not just math or science, but great books.
Yeah, and I'll recommend two as well. There's an essay called "Mathematician's Lament" by Paul Lockhart, and also an old book. It's a short book, or I think it's a paper. It's called "A Mathematician's Apology" by G.H. Hardy, and both of these are available as PDFs online. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload them to the Becoming the Alpha Muslim website, and I'll make them available to you guys. The links will be on my on the show notes. It, just wanted to thank you real quick for taking time out of your Sunday morning. I think it's your day to relax and unwind. we got pretty
Man,
we
there's
got
no
pretty
such
deep
thing
here.
in my life right now. I don't mind it though because
Yeah.
like I was saying earlier, that my journey officially with physics will end, and I'm going to continue down this path. Especially in the past year, I've gotten a lot of confidence in my ability to speak and to write and to didact, for lack of a better term, and more importantly, my ability and confidence, or rather, confidence in my ability to get paid from those things.
Mm.
And it's just more. I've always wanted to be those things, and I really think math has helped me for some weird way and some weird reason. But yeah. So in other words, what I'm saying is that I don't want to taking out the time for my morning because I feel like this is very important,
Yeah, and
not
I
just
just want to, yeah,
for
I just
you,
wanted
but for
to
me as well.
I just wanted to thank you in general for all of the sort of learning and wisdom and benefit that you've brought to my life. So I just wanted to say thank you for that as well.
Hey, no problem, man. The internet. Where would we be without it?
Yeah,
We wouldn't be sitting right here. That's for sure.
yeah, for
Like
real.
I was on a phone call with John Pearson, the web guy, and I was driving in my car, and I had Skype pumping through the speakers, and I was like, wow, we're in the future. For some reason, that was when it hit me. I mean, the car wasn't flying, but everything
You got
else
Skype
seemed
coming
like
through the speaker.
we were in the future, man. And I was like, wow, this is
That's
awesome.
crazy, for real. Oh man. So if you are interested in learning more about Ed Latimore or keeping in touch with Ed Latimore, you can find him on Twitter, which is at Ed Latimore, Edlatimore. You can also go to his website, edlatimore.com, and I suppose it's his magnum opus, but I don't know if he'll write something better. His book, Not Caring What Other People Think is a Superpower, is available at everywhere they sell fine books, maybe, but at least on
Hopefully,
Amazon,
at least,
at least
yeah.
on Amazon, in Kindle and paperback form. You got any plans for an audiobook, man?
I do. I have tons of plans for 2018 in this regard, and one of them is putting an audiobook version out. And next year, this time, you'll be like, man, we described that book as your magnum opus, and then you're gonna see some of the things coming out this year, and you'll be like, wow, that's nothing compared to what you did this year. At least that's how I like to see it. I mean, whether that there was that reaction, I've learned so much, so I'm really excited to put it in play and see how many people I can affect and hopefully make a difference in
Yeah.
their lives.
Yeah, and I'm sure I speak for your other readers when I say we're all looking forward to seeing your growth over the next year.
Thank you.
So my pleasure. So that's all for this episode. If you enjoyed listening to this topic and learning about this topic, I have a PDF ebook on the art of learning, specifically the art of seeking knowledge in the Islamic tradition, called The Seeker's Regalia, which you can download at my website, becomingthealphamuslim.com/seeker. And if also you enjoyed the podcast, please consider subscribing on iTunes and leaving us a rating and review. For my friend Ed Latimore and Becoming the Alpha Muslim, Jazakumullah khair for listening. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.